Thank you, Steve. Thank you for that very thorough introduction, and thanks for Graham as well for piling on the pressure to make sure this is a good presentation. As Steve said, I'm Nick Chubb. I'm the founder and managing director of Thetius. The mission of Thetius is to enable innovation across the entire maritime sector. We provide research on emerging technologies in the maritime industry, and so I get the fun of presenting to you a bit of a showcase of what's going on across the entire sector, both in terms of the digital transformation of the port sector as a whole, and then also specifically areas such as surveillance and traffic management. So I hope you enjoy what's out there and what's being developed. So first off, let's just do some numbers very quickly. From our market models, the smart port sector, so digital services for ports and terminals, was worth just over $3.5 billion in 2020. We're forecasting it to grow by about 7.5% over the next 5 years and be worth about $5.2 billion by 2025. So that's just software and digital services in the port sector. So it's growing at a reasonable rate, at a fairly steady rate, and there's lots of new entrants coming onto the market. This is sort of a bit of an overview of 50 or 60 of what we think are some of the most interesting companies operating in this space. We've sort of split them across our own categories, but you can see if you go down to the sort of bottom left at port call management, which certainly is very much related to this sort of question around traffic management. Most of the companies there are quite new. Obviously, there's a few exceptions like Wärtsilä and Ion, who've both been around for a while, but the rest of the companies are near enough all founded in the last sort of 5-6 years or so. So it's quite an exciting space. In our database, we're currently tracking about 146 companies and projects that are developing digital services for ports and terminals. Just over a fifth of those, 21%, were founded in the last 5 years, founded since 2016. So talking about digitalization in general, there's a huge amount going on. There's a huge number of new entrants sort of coming into the space, and they're developing some really interesting tech. So I'll take you through what I think are some of the most interesting of those across surveillance and security, across traffic management, and then I'll also just talk a little bit on business model innovation as well. So let's start with surveillance and security. First off, this is a company called Thetius. They're based down in Australia. They've actually been running since 1999, but they are focused on developing solar and wind powered drone systems. And they've developed a new system that they call persistent maritime surveillance, which is essentially where you can put out a network of drones across a coastal area. They have an exceptionally long mission time because they run on wind and solar, and they have a really high payload as well, so they can carry a huge number of sensors and think things like radar and cameras and all sorts of things for surveillance purposes, and they can just follow a sort of predetermined, totally autonomous mission pathway. So really interesting company, and worth checking out if you're sort of interested in boosting surveillance across a coastal area. Another interesting company called Sentient Systems. They have developed what they say is the world's first optical radar. They call it VIDAR, visual detection and ranging. It's a sort of wide area optical search system that operates at sea, used by aircraft, and it can operate in up to sea state 6. It's actually currently being used by the Canadian Coast Guard to do fisheries protection work. It's the main difference between this and radar is that when you've got high sea clutter or you've got rain and things like that, it's able to penetrate in a way that it isn't possible with sort of more traditional radar systems. So another company that's well worth checking out. And then one more on the surveillance side that I think are just really cool, apart from everything else. A company called Aerobotics. They've this box that you can see on your screen. They can just deliver it to your port. They then have a fully autonomous drone system that can take off, fly around, run surveillance, run security. They can do a whole range of other things as well, but it's completely autonomous. So there's no pilots required. There's no ongoing operations required. Even things like batteries, it will come in, land itself, swap the batteries out automatically, and start charging again. So if you've got a large port area that you want to monitor, systems like this, I think, are going to become increasingly important. And it also goes well beyond just security and surveillance, but actually to things like asset inspections. Rather than sending people up onto scaffolding that might be unsafe, you can now fly a drone up there without the need to have sort of quite expensive pilot training and things like that. These guys have just raised 123, well, not just, but they have raised $123 million, and they operate in a number of different sectors. Ports is one of them. So that's a few quite interesting companies on the security and surveillance side. If we now turning to vessel traffic management, a couple of companies that I think are worth highlighting here. First is Naviport, that's being rolled out by Wärtsilä at the moment. This is their web VTS system that you can see on the screen. Looks like a sort of nice UI version of a VTS system, but the key difference here, and what I think is quite exciting about it, is that it runs in a web browser. So you could run it on any device. You could run it on a Mac. You could run it on a PC. You could run it from your living room. You could run it from a port operations center. You could even run it on an iPad on the quayside. And so it just gives everyone a way to access information that's just much more accessible, which I think is absolutely a good thing. Next company, they're a startup. And so they don't have a cool video, and so I've had to go with a still for this one. But a company called PortChain, I would absolutely recommend checking out if you're at all involved in container terminal operations. They've built an AI-based port berth optimization engine. So links into your TOS via an API, and then it will make recommendations to schedule changes based on global traffic conditions, global congestion in other ports, essentially assessing the likelihood that a ship is going to arrive on time, and then making changes to berth schedules accordingly. They've had fantastic results, not just with ports and terminals, but also with carriers as well, helping to optimize their schedules. And one of the things I really love about them is that you can get access to PortChain's software, market-leading software, and it costs €400 per month per 100,000 TEU. So in terms of having something that's quite cost competitive, that doesn't require a massive drawn-out rollout that takes 3 years, and then by the time it's rolled out, it's all out of date. This is literally plug and play. You can sign up straight away. And integrate it to your TOS. So really interesting company, and definitely one worth watching. One more on the sort of traffic and berth management, company called Innoves One, based over in Singapore. They've just launched a platform called Marine M. They've rolled it out now to, I think, 13 ports in Indonesia. It's also being used in Singapore. This is much more focused on, rather than traffic for ships coming in and out, it's actually focused on the operational traffic of the port. So things like helping to optimize pilot schedules, helping to optimize the use of pilot boats, the use of tugs, the use of any other towage equipment, and even things like optimizing survey vessels and things like that. So it's a collaborative platform, cloud-based. Everyone gets access to all of the information they need, and then the schedules can be updated automatically, and everyone gets access to them. And it's again, lightweight, easy to install, and fantastic for sort of small mid-sized ports. I've got a minute left, so I'm just going to give you one more thing that I think is worth mentioning in this space: business model innovation. So we've talked about security, we've talked about traffic management, we've talked about sort of general trends in the sector, but in terms of business models, things are starting to change a little bit. And there's a case study that's just come out in the last month or so that I think demonstrates that really nicely. Cavotec have developed a system called MoorMaster. It's a vacuum mooring system, so no need to use mooring lines, holds the vessel in position. You can end up berthed in about sort of 25 seconds once the ship comes alongside. They've just launched this as a subscription service, so no upfront fees. You pay for it on a monthly basis. You can have a flexible contract. They'll come and take the equipment away if you decide to get rid of it. And it, as you can see on the screen there, massively increases the flexibility of for a port or terminal. If you found all that interesting, I've got 3 seconds left, so I'll give you a quick plug To Thetius, we operate the world's largest database of maritime innovation. It's available on subscription. My email's down there. Always very, very happy to chat to people about what's going on in the ports and terminal space. Steve, over to you.